Volume 2 of the Night Shift Horror Scary Stories. Subscribe to this channel if you're not part of this channel yet. I tried to convince myself that changing to daytime would fix everything, that sunlight and noise would break whatever pattern had followed me from job to job. But patterns don't disappear just because the lighting changes. They just learn how to hide better. And the first sign that nothing had really ended came on a perfectly ordinary afternoon when I walked down the office hallway carrying a stack of files and heard the same familiar rhythm behind me, soft and precise, matching my steps so exactly that I almost felt relief. Because at least it was consistent, at least it behaved the way I expected, and that was the moment I realized the worst part wasn't fear anymore. It was recognition, like greeting an old coworker you never liked but knew too well. And when I stopped walking near the water cooler, the second set of footsteps stopped too, just as patiently as always, waiting for me to continue, as if the pause was part of a routine we had silently agreed on. And I stood there longer than necessary, pretending to read a notice pinned to the wall, while my heart slowly adjusted to the reality that whatever this was had never belonged to any building. It had belonged to me. The office itself was bright and open, rows of desks and glass partitions reflecting daylight. Nothing like the narrow corridors or empty convenience store aisles that used to feel like traps. And yet the reflections bothered me more here because there were so many of them, every window creating a faint double of reality, every monitor screen holding a ghost of motion just outside my peripheral vision. And sometimes I would catch myself glancing at my reflection, not to check my appearance, but to see if the space behind me was empty, and it always was. At least in the way eyes expect emptiness to look. But there was still a sense of density there, like air that didn't quite behave like air. The first time someone else noticed something was wrong happened during a team meeting when my coworker Daniel paused mid-sentence and tilted his head slightly, eyes shifting past me toward the hallway outside the conference room. And he asked casually if someone else was joining us, and when I turned, there was no one there, just the corridor stretching away in that too perfect corporate silence. And he shrugged and continued talking. But his tone changed slightly, softer, as if he didn't want to draw attention to whatever he had thought he saw. That night I dreamed about the assisted living facility again, about the elevator doors sliding open into darkness, except this time I stepped inside without hesitation. And the darkness felt less like an absence and more like a presence that had been waiting patiently for me to make a decision. And when I woke up, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly in my ears, even though my apartment was silent, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering whether ignoring something for long enough turns it into a habit or into a trap. A week later, I received an email from an unknown sender with no subject line, just a blank message containing a single attached image. And when I opened it, my stomach tightened because it was a still frame from a security camera, grainy and slightly distorted, showing the hallway from my old assisted living job, the one with the storage room and the old elevator, and at the far end of the corridor, there was a tall blur standing where the distortion used to appear on the monitor, not detailed enough to identify, but distinct enough to make my hands shake, and I stared at it for a long time before realizing something worse. The timestamp was from the night before, long after I'd quit, which meant someone else had captured this and sent it to me, or the system had, or something had decided I needed to see it again. I deleted the email immediately, but that didn't erase the image from my mind. And over the next few days, I began noticing small changes in my environment that felt too deliberate to be coincidence, like the way doors seemed to open just slightly more than before, or how my phone screen would occasionally reflect a tall vertical shadow when I tilted it at certain angles. And every time I checked behind me, there was nothing except the ordinary world continuing as if it had never been interrupted. One afternoon while leaving work, I passed a maintenance worker in the stairwell who stopped me and asked if I had been coming up and down the stairs multiple times that day, and I told him no. I had been at my desk all afternoon, and he hesitated before explaining that he kept hearing footsteps echoing from above and below even when the stairwell was empty, and I felt a cold recognition settle into my chest, because the rhythm he described matched perfectly with what I had been hearing for months. That steady, measured pace that always waited for me to move first. I started avoiding quiet places after that, choosing crowded coffee shops instead of silent corners, leaving music playing in my apartment, even when I wasn't listening. But the footsteps adapted, blending into background noise until I couldn't separate them from real sounds anymore, and sometimes I would catch myself walking slower just to test whether the second rhythm would slow too, and it always did. Perfectly synchronized, never rushing ahead, never falling behind. One evening while browsing online, I stumbled across a forum thread discussing night shift experiences. And out of curiosity, I began reading through stories from other people who described similar patterns. Rules that didn't make sense, objects that appeared slightly wrong on camera feeds, unexplained calls from empty rooms, and most unsettling of all, a sense that something observed rather than attacked. Something patient that seemed to follow individuals rather than locations, and as I read, I felt less alone, but more exposed, like discovering a shared secret that wasn't meant to be spoken aloud. I hesitated before creating an account and posting my own experiences, keeping details vague but enough to see if anyone recognized the patterns. And within minutes, someone replied with a single sentence that made my chest tighten. If it started with footsteps, it never really stops. I closed the browser and sat there in silence, feeling the room press closer around me. And that night, when I walked to the kitchen for water, I heard the familiar rhythm again, clearer than it had been in weeks, step for step behind me. And I forced myself not to look back, because part of me believed the turning around might confirm something irreversible, like acknowledging a contract I never agreed to sign. The following morning, I found another email from the same unknown sender, this time containing a short video clip. And after several minutes of hesitation, I opened it, immediately recognizing the interior of the gas station where I used to work. The camera pointed down aisle 3, where the darkness had grown on the monitor, and the footage showed a new employee walking past the aisle before stopping abruptly, glancing over their shoulder as if hearing something, and then slowly stepping backward while staring at the empty space behind them. And the clip ended before anything else happened, leaving me with the same unfinished feeling that had followed every job, every location, every unexplained rule. I didn't know whether the emails were meant as warnings or reminders, and I began to wonder whether someone else had experienced the same pattern and was trying to show me that it wasn't over, that whatever it was had moved on to someone new while still keeping me within its orbit. and the thought that it might be watching multiple people at once felt worse than the idea of being singled out. A few days later, while commuting home on a crowded train, I caught my reflection in the window, layered over the dark tunnel rushing past outside, and for a brief moment I thought I saw a taller shape standing just behind me among the other passengers, its outline slightly blurred compared to everyone else. And when I turned quickly, there was only a stranger scrolling through their phone, ordinary and unaware. But the feeling lingered that the reflection had shown me something real, that the physical world refused to reveal directly. I started keeping notes again, writing down times and locations whenever I heard the footsteps or noticed reflections behaving strangely, hoping that tracking the pattern would give me control over it. And at first it seemed random, appearing at different times of day in different places. But gradually I realized there was a consistency I had overlooked. It always appeared when I was alone, long enough to notice silence, as if it required space to exist, as if noise and crowds forced it to retreat just beyond perception. One weekend I decided to test a theory by visiting the assisted living facility where it had begun, telling myself I needed closure. And when I parked outside the building, my hands trembled slightly, the familiar layout triggering memories I had tried to suppress. And as I walked through the lobby, pretending to inquire about visiting hours, I felt the air shift subtly, cooler than the warm afternoon outside. And I knew without looking that if I walked down the West Wing hallway, I would hear the footsteps again, louder than ever. But I forced myself to stay near the entrance and leave quickly before curiosity overcame caution. That night the footsteps followed me into my dreams again, echoing through endless corridors that shifted between locations, the gas station aisle merging with the motel parking lot, the office hallway stretching into darkness, and in every dream I felt watched, but not threatened, studied rather than hunted. And when I woke up just before dawn, the silence in my apartment felt too complete, like a stage waiting for someone to enter. I sat up slowly, listening, and for several minutes there was nothing except my own breathing. And then from somewhere just outside my bedroom door came a single soft step, perfectly measured, patient as always, followed by silence that felt heavier than sound. And I realized, with a quiet certainty, that whatever had begun during those night shifts had not ended when I left them behind. It had simply been waiting for me to notice that it never really needed the night at all.